what's going on, y'all? T-Bob here.
And Jake as well.
And you're about to watch a little OTB LSU.
We're going to give you all the latest, greatest between LSU football, baseball, women's basketball, softball, and everything in between.
Bottom line, if you want to talk Tigers, keep it locked, subscribe, like it, and we hope you enjoy it. It is the low point of the Brian Kelly era.
Yeah.
Thus far. And I guess that's the next conversation, Jake, because it is very funny, right? Again, that's why I love football. It's a meritocracy. And your fortunes can change like that, all based on results, to where after Ole Miss LSU, Jake, oh my God, Brian Kelly's good. LSU's good. LSU might be a playoff team. Lane Kiffin sucks. Ole Miss is bad. Ole Miss, Lane Kiffin's never going to get there. Well, here we are a couple of results later, and Lane Kiffin's great. Ole Miss is great. Ole Miss is a playoff team. LSU is bad. Brian Kelly's the wrong man. He's never going to get there. Here's what I think on Coach Kelly right now. I think this is it's kind of like a lot of the takes that I see on him are kind of, I think, tinge with emotion. But my take is he is obviously a coach that has a very high floor. Right? His processes are such that you are going to put together a very competent team. For the most part, you will beat the teams that you are supposed to beat. In fact, I still think that LSU wins these next 3 games and finishes pretty strong and finishes 9-3. However, there are now and should be major questions about what is the ceiling. Because the theory coming out of Notre Dame was that Notre Dame was the ceiling. That it was a glass that he could not break through. Now, you might need to start asking. Because, here you have DeBoer in year 1 coming into Death Valley and doing this, and you're in year 3. You may have to start asking, well, was the Notre Dame the actual problem there? Because look at Notre Dame, right? Playing pretty good football, 1 loss. No, I never doubt the Irish's ability to maybe screw something up here down the stretch. Marcus Freeman's been... He kind of has the opposite problem where it's a smaller games that seem to trip him up. But you have a Notre Dame team ranked ahead of you that's trending towards a very obvious spot in the college football playoff. And here you are again kind of going through the same script. But again, it's not like it's an abject disaster. High floor. Questionable ceiling, I think, right now in the Kelly era.
Obviously, like the expectation for a place like this is to play for championships, right? And so that's why the expectation is always set so high, because you've won the second most in the last 25 years of anybody. More than Ohio State, more than Florida, more than Clemson, more than Michigan, Ohio State, whoever it is, right? Alabama's the only team that's won more in the last 25 years, and 3 coaches have done that. And so the expectation is set. And Brian Kelly talked about it like from the moment he got here. That is what it is. That is what it has to be. And so, like, there's places across the country where 9-3 is great. There's, they would love to have a 9-3 record. But when you look at what it is to what the expectation is going to be, like, that is going to be disappointing. Like, people aren't going to be happy with that. And once you get into year number 3, because what year would it have been was Saban been year 4? It'd been year 4 for Coach Saban.
When he won the Natty?
Yeah.
Yeah. 2001, 2. Well, 3. Yeah.
It had been
4,
year 4. And then Les would have been 5, 6, 7. It was 3rd year for Les. Coach O was 17, 18, 19. Right? So, again, you're going to be graded off what those before you have done. 2 of them won it in year 3, 1 in year 4. And so there's not like, even though you take over a crazy situation, there's not going to be a lot of patience, right? And so that's going to be, it's going to be a conversation. That conversation is not going away. Now, you do have, big wins on your resume. I do disagree with that point. Like, Ole Miss is a big win.
Yeah, Ole Miss is a big win. You had a really big win 2 years. Obviously the Bama win was massive year 1. Yeah, for sure. There's big wins.
But I think you pair, this disappointing performance, and there's been 2 of these. Tennessee in 22, and then this game.
This is so much worse, though. But I agree. But I think this is way worse.
Because a lot of people take Alabama and Obviously.
Well, Tennessee was earlier in the year. You didn't really know what you had. I mean, here it was very clear, right?
Yeah.
Two teams, playoffs on the line.
It's also the season opener
you lay an
situation
egg.
too. And that's not just, from it's 5, right? It's 5 years, so it's 2 coaches, but
yeah, if you beat USC this year, a bad USC team, you're
still
good.
in it.
Yeah, you're good. You're still very much alive.
So like that portion of it also kind of plays into a lot of people's anger, I think.
I think that how do we feel about, again, because I keep going back, just how much bigger, stronger, and faster Alabama looked. Or even in that South Carolina game, right? Like how their defense looks like to yours. Like they're through a mixture of recruiting, which probably goes back to some of the original sins of like getting rid of Corey Raymond and others only to come crawling back to them. The Matt House debacle, which caused NFL players to leave off of this defense instead of coming back. But like, I don't know if it's more recruiting or more strength and conditioning, but I do agree with the point made in the chat that A&M and Alabama just kind of, and Alabama to a further extent than A&M did, but they just look bigger, stronger, and faster. And again, like everything, it's not to say that it's a disaster for LSU, because I think there have been high points, like that UCLA game when every single human being in the stadium was dying. The only people who weren't were the LSU. Like LSU was fine; they were fine in that heat. But at a school that, like, even when LSU was screwing up in the Miles era, the thing that they started to cling to like a life raft was this idea of NFLSU, where you still just had dudes all over the place. It does not feel like you do right now. Have said dudes. So would you say, I mean, is this more of a recruiting? Where do you think maybe the fault lies there?
You're talking about just like depth, where you can have an offensive line issue and it doesn't handcuff you like this one has.
I didn't talk about that. I mean, that I would say that's definitely recruiting / talent retention deal. That yes, that like this is almost not, it's not quite as disastrous, but losing Garrett Dellinger almost felt like losing Eric McCoy for the New Orleans Saints. Like one player that really changes the entire makeup of that side of the ball.
Yeah, I think the retention part of it, certainly we talked about that throughout the offseason. There's 3 defensive tackles that I think we all assumed were going to come back, and they're not here. Like that, there's a portion of that. And you're always going to lose a Malik Neighbors, a Brian Thomas Jr. Like those guys were always going, and they should have gone to the NFL draft. But that's a portion of it. Like how many guys can you have come back? Like Glenn Dorsey could have gone to the draft in 06, but he came back in 07. Like those are massive whenever you win those battles. Like even in a transfer portal era when it's easier to get veteran players, those are big. And, how many of those guys can you convince? And then what also do you do in the transfer portal? How active do you want to be? When you have a deficiency, how all in do you go? Right? I mean, there's teams across the country that have gone all in on the transfer portal because they were deficient. They had deficiencies. Now, there's some teams that did that and they're not good teams, so it doesn't always work. I mean, today's roster management is unlike we've ever seen before, and you've got to come up with the formula that gives you, frontline starters, but also depth. And depth right now, you're even seeing it at Georgia. Georgia doesn't have the depth that they've always had. No. Typically, Georgia can have an injury, and they roll in another 5-star guy that's ready to play. It's been waiting for 2 years. Well, that guy's not there anymore.
Yeah.
That guy's somewhere else. And so, like, when even they have an injury, and it's who can get enough depth. Like, Ole Miss did a really nice job. In the portal, they went and got a ton of offensive linemen, and they retained all their offensive linemen.
True.
So they got 11 guys that they feel like are starters because 11 of them have starting experience in the NCAA.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that doesn't happen everywhere, but that's one example of what we're talking about. It's hard to do in this day and age, but you got to stack talent because you can't just be – this isn't the NFL where you can have an injury and it's like, okay, we can still go get a guy that's NFL quality from either another team or somebody that's maybe out of the league 1 year and we're like, hey, we just got to get this guy back in. Yeah. You can make up for it. Like once your roster's set, even with all the movement that we have, the roster's set.
Yeah, there's no way – I think Kelly said that after the game, right? There's no waiver wire. So I think that would be, I think year 4 is the absolute final stand for the excuse of you took over a god-awful situation. I'm even willing to extend grace through this year because of how extreme the lack of scholarship players was when you took over. And again, I don't, if you're telling me I shouldn't even extend to year 3, I don't think that's a valid argument to be made, right? We live in the era of the portal, like Jake's getting at. Like, you can solve these things, right, with correct scouting and recruiting. So maybe but I'm someone who kind of probably always errs on the side of giving more rope than maybe others would. But yeah, next year, if you're not back to feeling like you got dogs all over the field, if you're not back to being able to push people around a little bit, then you might just have to call it is what it is. Wow, Jake, what incredible takes.
Those guys, they're just the best.
I think so. And if you think so, again, hit the like button, subscribe, ring the bell so you get notifications when we post every single day here on OTB LSU.